What kind of man walks away from Wall Street profits to chase machines that were already declared dead? In the 1960s, steam locomotives were finished. Railroads scrapped them, museums parked them. The future belonged to diesel. Then one trader decided the past was not done yet. He spent millions restoring giants of iron and fire and turned nostalgia into a nationwide spectacle. This is how Ross Rowland built a locomotive empire no one saw coming. Ross E. Rowland Jr. was born on July 11, 1940 in Albany, New York, into a family where railroading wasn't a hobby but a way of life. His father, Ross E. Rowland Sr., worked as a locomotive engineer for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. His grandfather and great-grandfather had also been railroaders on lines like the Central Railroad of New Jersey. The tracks ran through the family bloodline across multiple generations, and young Ross absorbed that heritage from his earliest memories. In 1945, the family moved to Cranford, New Jersey, near active rail lines where the boy could watch trains pass regularly. He spent his childhood sketching locomotives, visiting local roundhouses, and dreaming of the day he might operate one of those massive machines himself. The sound of steam whistles and the sight of smoke billowing from locomotive stacks became the backdrop of his youth. Summer trips took the family to the Thousand Islands region, where his father attended Army Reserves training at Pine Camp. The family rented cottages in Clayton and sometimes stayed on Grindstone Island, experiences that would later draw Rowland back to upstate New York in his final years. But as a boy, his attention remained fixed on the locomotives that fascinated him above all else. At age 14, after a family argument, Rowland hitchhiked away from home in a burst of teenage rebellion. He returned shortly after, but the incident revealed a restless energy that would define his entire life. He channeled that drive back into rail pursuits, volunteering at the New Jersey Museum of Transportation and the Black River and Western Railroad during the 1950s and 60s. There, he gained hands-on experience with steam engines during an era when diesel was rapidly replacing them across America. But Rowland grew frustrated with the limited scope of these operations. Short tourist runs on small branch lines couldn't satisfy his vision of what steam railroading should be. He wanted to see these magnificent machines running on mainline tracks at full speed, recreating the spectacle that had once defined American transportation. He would spend the next 6 decades making that vision reality. The path to Rowland's locomotive empire began not at a railroad but on Wall Street. At age 17, a friend introduced him to the futures investment industry in New York City. Rowland discovered he had a natural talent for commodities trading, reading markets and making decisions that turned profits consistently. He rose quickly through the ranks of an industry built on risk and reward. By 1966, at just 26 years old, Rowland founded Floor Broker Associates Incorporated, which grew into one of the largest commodities brokerages in New York. The firm specialized in trades like pork belly futures, a market that might seem unglamorous, but moved enormous sums of money every day. Rowland proved exceptionally skilled at navigating this volatile world where fortunes could be made or lost in hours. His success extended beyond his own firm. Rowland served on the board of COMEX, a precious metals investment firm that handled trading in gold, silver, copper, and aluminum. He held memberships in several other exchanges, including the New York Coffee and Sugar Exchange, the New York Mercantile Exchange, the New York Cotton Exchange, and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. His name became known in trading circles across the country. A 33-year career in finance accumulated a multi-million-dollar fortune that gave Rowland something most railroad enthusiasts could only dream about: the resources to pursue his passion without limits. While other preservation groups struggled to raise funds for basic maintenance, Rowland could write checks that covered entire locomotive restorations. He lived a dual life during these decades. By day, he wore a suit and tie, making deals in the high-pressure environment of commodities trading. By weekend, he put on an engineer's cap and overalls, working on the steam locomotives that had fascinated him since childhood. The two worlds could not have been more different, but Rowland thrived in both. When he retired from finance in the late 1990s, he could dedicate himself fully to railroads. The Wall Street fortune would fund an empire of steam excursions, locomotive restorations, and ambitious projects that kept steam alive long after the major railroads had abandoned it. The money was just the beginning of what he would build. In 1966, the same year Rowland founded his brokerage firm, he established the High Iron Company to operate steam excursion trains. The name came from railroad slang for mainline tracks, signaling his ambition from the very start. This wouldn't be another tourist railroad running short trips on forgotten branch lines. Rowland intended to put steam back where it belonged, on the high iron. The company's first excursion ran on October 16, 1966, in collaboration with Steamtown founder F. Nelson Blunt. Rowland leased Canadian Pacific Locomotive 1278 and hauled passengers to the Mid-Atlantic region, offering them an experience that had largely vanished from American railroads. The trip demonstrated that public appetite for steam excursions remained strong even as diesel locomotives dominated commercial operations. High Iron Company focused on public and demonstration trips on existing railroads, working with major carriers to secure permission for steam operations on active main lines. This required negotiating with railroad executives, meeting safety requirements, and coordinating schedules with regular freight and passenger traffic. Rowland proved skilled at navigating these challenges, building relationships that would serve his ventures for decades. The company expanded rapidly, operating excursions across the Northeast and Midwest with an eclectic fleet of steam locomotives. Rowland ran trips from Hoboken, New Jersey in the late 1960s and early 1970s, using engines like Nickel Plate Road 759 and Reading 2102. Each successful excursion built the company's reputation and attracted more passengers eager to experience steam railroad firsthand. In 1968, Rowland achieved something that had never been done before in American railroad preservation. He restored Nickel Plate Road 759 from static museum display to active mainline service, proving that locomotives written off as permanent exhibits could run again. This pioneering work established a model that other preservationists would follow, demonstrating what was possible with sufficient resources and determination. High Iron Company became the operational hub for Rowland's growing empire, the vehicle through which he would launch increasingly ambitious projects over the coming decades. The small excursion company was about to go national. Rowland's first major triumph came in 1969 with the Golden Spike Centennial Limited, a cross-country excursion commemorating the 100th anniversary of the first transcontinental railroad's completion at Promontory, Utah. The train, powered by Nickel Plate Road 759, departed from New York City's Grand Central Terminal and traveled west to the historic site where the Golden Spike had been driven a century earlier. The journey drew an estimated 1.5 million people to trackside viewing points along the route, crowds gathering in cities and towns to watch steam power pass through their communities one more time. For many observers, it was their first opportunity to see a working steam locomotive, and the experience left lasting impressions that created new generations of rail enthusiasts. The Golden Spike Limited demonstrated that steam excursions could operate on a national scale, drawing attention and crowds far beyond what regional tourist railroads achieved. Rowland had proven his concept. Americans wanted to see steam locomotives running on real railroads, not just circling small museum grounds. During the trip, actor John Wayne rode aboard the train and spent time with Rowland discussing the spectacle they were creating. Wayne suggested that a similar event should be organized for the nation's upcoming bicentennial celebration in 1976. The idea planted a seed in Rowland's mind that would grow into his most ambitious project. The success of the Golden Spike Limited generated significant revenue through ticket sales and corporate sponsorships, demonstrating that steam excursions could be financially viable at scale. Rowland had found a formula that combined his passion for railroads with his business acumen from Wall Street, creating events that preserved heritage while generating income to fund future operations. The Golden Spike trip also established Rowland's reputation as a showman who could deliver spectacle on a grand scale. He understood that steam locomotives were not just machines, but symbols of American history and progress, and he knew how to present them in ways that captured public imagination. John Wayne's suggestion was about to become the biggest rail event in American history. In 1970, inspired by the Golden Spike success and John Wayne's suggestion, Rowland founded the nonprofit American Freedom Train Foundation to create a traveling bicentennial exhibition that would bring American history directly to communities across the nation. The project would combine his love of steam locomotives with a celebration of the country's 200th anniversary, creating something unprecedented in scale and ambition. The American Freedom Train consisted of 25 cars displaying over 550 original historical documents, artifacts, and memorabilia from the National Archives and private collections. Visitors could see treasures like George Washington's copy of the Constitution, the original Louisiana Purchase document, Martin Luther King Jr.'s pulpit, and Judy Garland's dress from The Wizard of Oz. The exhibition brought pieces of American history to communities that might never have the opportunity to visit Washington, D.C. or major museums. The train toured 25,000 miles across 48 states from April 1975 to December 1976, stopping in 138 cities over 21 months. Steam locomotives pulled the exhibition from city to city, with Rowland coordinating an operation of enormous complexity. He restored Reading 2101 as the primary power, painting it in red, white, and blue as AFT number 1. Southern Pacific 4449, rescued from a Portland park and restored in daylight colors adopted for the occasion, and Texas and Pacific 610 also served as motive power during the tour. The results exceeded anything Rowland had imagined. 7 million people paid admission to tour the exhibition cars, with an estimated 40 million more gathered trackside to watch the train pass through their communities. The American Freedom Train became the largest traveling exhibition in American history and one of the most successful bicentennial events of the celebration. The project earned Rowland an honorary lifetime membership in the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, one of only 16 such honors ever awarded. The recognition came from professional railroad workers who appreciated what Rowland had accomplished in bringing steam back to mainline operations on such a massive scale. Not everyone praised the exhibition, though. The American Indian movement protested the exhibit's lack of Native American representation, and other groups raised concerns about whose history was being celebrated. Rowland responded by offering tours to activists and explaining the space limitations that forced difficult curatorial choices. Controversies highlighted the challenges of creating any historical exhibition, but they didn't diminish the train's popularity with the public. 47 million Americans had seen Ross Rowland's vision come to life. The momentum from the Freedom Train carried Rowland into new partnerships with major railroads. In 1977, he collaborated with the Chessie System to create the Chessie Steam Special, a series of excursions celebrating the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad's 150th anniversary. Reading 2101, fresh from its Freedom Train duties, pulled passengers across the Chessie System network through 1978, drawing large crowds at every stop. The partnership demonstrated that Class I railroads saw value in steam excursions for public relations and community engagement. Chessie System provided track access, operational support, and promotional resources that amplified the impact of Rowland's operations. The excursions attracted hundreds of thousands of passengers and spectators, proving that the Freedom Train's success could be replicated on a smaller but still significant scale. In 1979, disaster struck when a roundhouse fire in Kentucky damaged Reading 2101. The locomotive that led the Freedom Train across America was now sidelined, its future uncertain, but the setback led to an opportunity. Insurance compensation from the fire allowed Rowland to acquire Chesapeake and Ohio 614, a locomotive that would become the flagship engine for decades. Rowland invested 18 months and $1.5 million restoring the 614, a massive 484 Northern type measuring 112 feet long and weighing 239 tons. The restoration was meticulous, returning the locomotive to operating condition while adding modifications like an auxiliary tender that doubled its water capacity for longer runs. The restored 614 powered the 1980-1981 Chessie Safety Express, a public awareness campaign promoting railroad-grade crossing safety. The train toured the Chessie System network, stopping in communities to educate the public about the dangers of highway rail crossings, while giving millions of Americans another opportunity to see steam power in action. These corporate partnerships expanded High Iron Company's reach and demonstrated Rowland's ability to align his preservation goals with railroad business objectives. Steam excursions were not just nostalgia trips, but marketing tools that generated goodwill and media coverage for the sponsoring railroads. The Empire now had its flagship locomotive. Rowland's empire was built on a collection of iconic steam locomotives that he acquired, restored, and operated over 5 decades. Beyond the famous 614, his fleet included Canadian Pacific G5 462 locomotives, numbered 1238, 1278, and 1286. He owned nickel plate Road 284, number 759, the engine that had pulled the Golden Spike Centennial Limited. Reading 484 locomotives 2101 and 2102 served in various excursions before and after the Freedom Train. Each locomotive required significant investment to acquire and restore. Rowland rescued Reading 2101 from a Baltimore scrapyard in 1975, undertaking a restoration so rushed that workers called it the 30-day miracle to prepare it for Freedom Train service. The work happened at the Reading Railroad shops in Pennsylvania, where crews worked around the clock to meet the deadline. The restorations were largely self-funded from Rowland's Wall Street fortune, giving him independence that other preservation groups lacked. He didn't need to wait for grants or fundraising campaigns to complete projects. When a locomotive needed work, he could authorize his expenditure immediately and keep operations moving forward. His flagship 614 saw particularly ambitious use. In 1985, Rowland modified the locomotive as 614T and operated it hauling coal trains through West Virginia's New River Gorge. The runs collected data on modern steam efficiency, and the results demonstrated that steam could actually achieve lower fuel costs than diesel under certain conditions. The experiment attracted attention from railroads and energy companies interested in alternatives during an era of volatile oil prices. In the late 1990s, 614 powered New Jersey transit excursions from Hoboken to Port Jervis, running at speeds up to 79 miles per hour on mainline tracks. Passengers who booked these trips experienced steam railroading as it had been in the glory days, with a powerful locomotive pulling them through the Hudson Valley at express train speeds. Rowland also played a crucial role in saving Southern Pacific 4449, the famous daylight locomotive that became one of the Freedom Train's signature engines. His involvement helped ensure the locomotive's restoration and continued operation, creating an icon that remains active today. These machines were the physical foundation of everything Rowland built. Rowland's ambitions extended beyond preserving the past to reimaging steam technology for the future. During the oil crisis of the 1970s, when fuel prices spiked and energy independence became a national priority, he founded American Coal Enterprises to develop a modern coal-fired steam locomotive that could reduce railroad dependence on diesel fuel. The ACE 3000 project aimed to create a reciprocating steam locomotive using contemporary materials and engineering principles. Unlike the preserved antiques Rowland operated for excursions, this would be a new machine designed for modern freight service. The concept attracted attention from railroads and energy companies looking for alternatives to expensive diesel fuel. Rowland used his 614 locomotive for freight tests on CSX lines in 1985, collecting performance data that would inform the ACE 3000 design. The test demonstrated that steam remained viable for certain applications, particularly where coal was abundant and diesel fuel was expensive. The results provided evidence that modern steam was not just nostalgia, but a potentially practical technology. However, falling oil prices in the late 1980s eliminated the economic case for coal-fired locomotives. The ACE 3000 never progressed beyond the planning stage. No prototype was ever built. The project represented Rowland's most ambitious attempt to move beyond preservation into innovation, and its failure showed the limits of what even his resources could achieve against market forces. Rowland established multiple other entities over the years, including Steam Locomotive Corporation of America, Iron Horse Enterprises, and a revived American Freedom Train Foundation 2.0 in 2016 that proposed a new steam-powered exhibition train for the nation's 250th anniversary in 2026. Other ventures included the 1992 21st Century Limited, sponsored by Chrysler, which was canceled before operation, and the Pacific Wilderness Railway on Vancouver Island from 2000 to 2001, which drew criticism for poor management before closing. Not every project succeeded, but the constant stream of new ideas demonstrated Rowland's relentless energy and his determination to keep finding new ways to bring steam into public consciousness. Some dreams came true, others remained visions of what might have been. Rowland's later years brought both continued activity and increasing challenges. He pursued the Yellow Ribbon Express from 2007 to 2017, a project supporting the Wounded Warrior Project that aimed to use steam excursions for charitable purposes. Guest engineering appearances kept him connected to operations, including portraying Santa Claus on a 2018 Toys for Tots train. His service on Amtrak's board of directors in the 1980s gave him influence over national passenger rail policy, though his preservation activities remained separate from that role. The board position reflected the recognition Rowland had earned as someone who understood both the business and romance of American railroads. But criticisms accumulated over the years. Some observers questioned the feasibility of his announced projects, noting that several had been promoted publicly but never materialized. The proposed 2026 Freedom Train for the nation's 250th anniversary drew skepticism from those who saw it primarily as a mechanism to fund restoration of the 614 rather than a viable national exhibition. Failed attempts to sell the 614 in 2000 and 2002 highlighted the challenges of maintaining expensive steam locomotives without ongoing revenue from operations. The cost of keeping such machines in operating condition exceeded what even Rowland's fortune could comfortably sustain indefinitely. In November 2024, Rowland finally sold the 614 to RJD America for restoration at the Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania. He rode along during the locomotive's move to its new home, saying goodbye to the engine that had been his flagship for over 4 decades. The sale ensured the locomotive would receive professional restoration and continue operating rather than deteriorating in storage. Throughout it all, Rowland remained a distinctive presence, often seen in his signature polka dot cap and overalls with a gruff but lovable demeanor that endeared him to fellow enthusiasts, even when his projects drew criticism. The empire was winding down, but the legacy was secure. Ross Rowland passed away on July 19, 2025, at age 85 in Sackett's Harbor, New York, after a brief battle with lung cancer. He was survived by his wife, Karen Bendix Rowland, and his family. The location of his death connected to those childhood summers in the Thousand Islands region, bringing his life full circle to a place that had shaped him decades earlier. The tributes that followed his passing reflected the scale of what he'd accomplished. The Heritage Rail Alliance had awarded him their Lifetime Achievement recognition in 2021, acknowledging his pioneering role in mainline steam excursions. Professor John Hankins praised him for bringing spectacle to railroading, capturing what made Rowland's approach distinctive. His empire spanned more than 10 railway-related companies over 6 decades. He'd owned and operated some of the most iconic steam locomotives in America. He'd put 47 million people trackside to watch the American Freedom Train. He'd proven that steam could run on mainline tracks long after the major railroads declared it obsolete. The multi-million-dollar fortune from Wall Street had funded an empire that existed nowhere else in American railroad preservation. Other groups relied on donations, grants, and volunteer labor. Rowland could write checks that made things happen immediately, accelerating projects that might otherwise have taken years or never happened at all. His methods were sometimes controversial, and not every project succeeded, but the locomotives he saved continue operating today. Southern Pacific 4449 runs excursions on the West Coast. The 614 is receiving restoration at Strasburg. Reading 2102 operates in Pennsylvania. The engines that Rowland touched have outlasted the man who saved them. The Wall Street trader who spent his weekends chasing steam locomotives left behind something that money alone couldn't create: a legacy of preservation, spectacle, and passion that inspired generations of railroad enthusiasts to believe that steam could live forever. Ross Rowland proved that one person with resources and determination could change what was possible. Ross Rowland took a fortune built on commodities trading and transformed it into something unprecedented in American railroad preservation. He saved locomotives that would have been scrapped, organized events that drew tens of millions of spectators, and kept steam running on mainline tracks for 6 decades after the railroads abandoned it. The man in the polka dot cap built an empire of iron and fire that will outlast us all. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of the people who shaped railroad history.